Hey, Eon here. The topic of today's video is Cartoon Network series Batman Brave and the Bold. Well, what got me started on this topic was tonight's episode and the previous episode last week. After going on a hiatus for several months, the new season of Batman Brave and the Bold just premiered about a week or so ago. And to be absolutely honest, I'm pretty disappointed with it. I know overall that this show's kind of cheesy and stuff, but there's only so much cheese you can really put before it really starts going downhill. I seriously have to admit, the Superman episode, that is probably the worst episode of the series so far, in my opinion. Now, don't get me wrong, I like Batman Brave and the Bold, and to be honest, I like their take on Batman. It's not as dark and serious as a lot of the other Batman-related stuff has been lately. Heck, I've watched other videos or whatever saying the theme and basis of it is based on the 1950s, 60s comics or whatever. I'm not really familiar with those comics, but just from watching the show, I can tell that they have a much more light-hearted take than what the more modern stuff does. I mean, it's not as serious or dark or whatever. That's what I like about this show. That it seems kind of more old-styled and old-fashioned. Ever since I started watching it, I expected a certain amount of cheesiness and corniness, but they had pretty decent storytelling right off the bat. I mean, the first season started off very strong, in my opinion. I loved how they were setting it up, and a lot of the more underrated comic book superheroes, I never heard of a lot of these guys before, like Blue Beetle, Plastic Man, etc. They really gave these heroes justice by having them work alongside Batman, fleshing out their personalities, showing what their superpowers were. This really is an all-around great cartoon. It's really... I really have to say, this is a good way to appeal to the modern age and maybe convince modern kids to read some of the older comic books and stuff. That's what this show is really good for. But the second season so far, jeez. I mean, after seeing the musical episode of Batman that ended the last season, that one was already making me facepalm. That was just corny to the max, but it wasn't as bad as the Superman episode, I'll say that much. It had a much better plot than the Superman episode, in other words. The Superman episode, it just, I don't know. It's not that I'm saying they did a bad job of portraying Superman. They got a lot of details right. I mean, they had the kryptonite, they had Superman's powers down, they really had the feel for the older comics, if I know anything about those, but it just felt kind of flat. The characters felt one-dimensional. I mean, Jimmy and Lois were so lame. They were pretty much just walking cardboard cutouts, especially with some of the stuff they were saying. They didn't really have as much dimension or whatever as some of the other characters did in the earlier episodes. I mean, Blue Beetle, Plastic Man, they had more personality. They had more personality when they had episodes and they were teaming up with Batman. Heck, when there were episodes where only one character showed up and teamed up with Batman, those characters had more character development. Heck, in the episode where Batman went to the future to face off with Gorilla Grodd, the blonde human dude, and his dog sidekick had more personality development than Lois Lane and Jimmy. I don't know. I'm not saying that their portrayal of these characters was bad. I'm just saying the plot could have been better written. It was just way too cheesy. And then how Superman was going about being bad, that's Voltar level villainry right there. That was kind of lame. That was one of the key points that made me raise my eyebrows. Now, the cheesy villainry, that's something I expect from League of Super Evil. But from Superman, yeah, that just doesn't really fit his personality, if you know what I mean. I know they were trying to be lighthearted. He didn't necessarily have to be extremely evil, but he could do something a lot worse than crowning himself king or stealing newspapers. I mean, the stuff he did, yeah, that's Voltar level evil. That wouldn't really register on people's radars and instantly make them turn on him. You have to do something a lot bigger than that. I don't know. I know some of the villains on there have been pretty outrageous, especially Crazy Quilt. That was one of the worst ones on there. Yeah, I didn't really like the episode with Robin either, but seriously, this episode was just so chock full of cheesiness, I couldn't take it. I mean, Gorilla Grodd was pretty darn evil in the episode he appeared in. Why couldn't they have Superman go Gorilla Grodd's level of evil? Then I'd see why they'd want to stop him, but what he was doing in that episode? Really? That was League of Super Evil level evil. Not necessarily something you'd expect Superman to stoop to. That was just... well, that's just my opinion of it. This week's episode, I'm going to get to discussing it. Yeah, this week's episode is what really made me want to make this video. After watching it, I kind of have mixed feelings about it. I kind of have a feeling with some of the bits, they were really poking fun at animation from earlier time periods, like 1960s, 70s, when Hanna-Barbera was really popular, stuff like that, some of the earlier animation of Batman. Heck, I can honestly say that some older animation for superhero shows, pretty darn lame. One of the worst superhero cartoons I've seen, Spiderman and His Amazing Friends. Ugh, I hated sitting through that every morning. I swear my brother made me sit through that just because I hated it and just because I couldn't stand how absolutely terrible it was. Don't get me wrong, I like Spider-Man, but God, they could have done so much better with the storytelling on that show. I could honestly say they were poking fun. They were more poking fun at some of the earlier animation and stuff with some of the bits on there. As I said, I'm not really quite sure what to make of it. I'd really like to get a person's opinion that's seen a lot of animation from earlier time periods and can kind of compare it alongside this episode. They did a pretty good job contributing in homage to older animation, though. I mean, they had everything right down. They had everything pretty accurate. They did a great job with the animation. That's one of the biggest things I liked about this episode. I also liked the opening bit. That was absolutely hilarious. That was one of the few points in the show that the cheesiness and over-the-top corniness that it's been chock full of lately really worked and actually pulled off being funny. But that's because that bit was a lot more cartoonish than what this show really comes off as, so that's why it worked. But the other couple of bits, the one where they were showing Batman being a manga or whatever, or an anime, yeah, the English voices not matching up with the animation, they explained that, and I kind of found that funny. But the thing overall, I think if they were really poking fun at some of the stuff, they shouldn't have copied how cheesy and lame some of the storytelling was with this kind of stuff. They should have just went with an actual decent storyline and actually went with their usual good level quality of storytelling with some cheesiness and corniness thrown in. I don't know. Just watching the show lately, yeah. But what really got me on this topic was the very last bit where they had Batman team up with Scooby-Doo. To be absolutely honest, my favorite part of that was when Batman and Robin actually started kicking butt, and when they had Scooby and Shaggy kicking the crap out of the Joker and the Penguin. Now that was unexpected. That I liked. I honestly think they should have had more of that. I'm not dissing Scooby-Doo or anything when I say that. It's just, it'd be seriously awesome to see Shaggy and Scooby actually man up more often and do stuff like that. But that's just my personal opinion. Yeah, I'm kind of a fan of the show. Not exactly a huge comic buff, so I'm not entirely sure what sort of different takes there are on Batman, but this week's episode, pretty interesting. I liked how they set it up, but I seriously think they could have done a better job with it. I don't know. I'm kind of hoping they go back to the original format of the series next week and don't introduce one of the big names like Superman. This show does a lot better bringing in more underrated heroes like Blue Beetle or Plastic Man that not everybody's really familiar with. I mean, if you're not a comic buff, you don't really know who those characters are. So it'd be really nice if they introduced a lot more of those and really gave them more of the limelight and really worked on that. If they're working on that, they've got a pretty good premise and such going on. That's really what works for this show. But you think big ticket superheroes like Superman or even introducing Wonder Woman or something, I'd seriously say stay away from those, because that's probably what's going to lead to a lot more people kind of speaking out like I did in this particular video. Don't get me wrong, I like this show. I like it a lot. I just felt like I had to say something. I'm seriously hoping that the rest of the series really goes back to the same kind of quality it was in Season 1. I'm not saying this is the best cartoon, but what really makes it stand out is how it really makes an homage to the older cartoons, how it's set up in a lighter tone compared to other superhero shows, and I seriously want to see the show continue. Actually, I've been waiting quite a bit for this show to come back, and now that it's back, yeah, that's really all I gotta say. This is Eon, signing off. Bye.